got
I wondered how she was doing with her
4
shoulder.
things, and I guess Michael's expecting a pretty long executive meeting.
She's not here. Well, you'll do great.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work-study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council Workshop Session, September 10, 2024. This meeting is called to order. I will do an attendance roll call. We got a couple members absent at the moment. Councilmember Baldenegro.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Melner.
Present.
Councilmember Tomachoff. Councilmember Turner. Vice Mayor.
Here.
Okay, and I'm present. So with that, Ms. Moreno, would you go ahead and get us started?
Sierra Verde Park improvements.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide staff report on the first two items on our agenda today will be John Kennedy, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Mayor and council, glad to be here today to bring back to you Sierra Verde Park improvements. So, quick timeline of how we got here. The end of May 28th, we presented two options to the City Council on park improvements for Sierra Verde. With the consensus was given to hold a public meeting to further vet both options. July 9th, we held a community engagement meeting at the Foothills Library. And then the week of July 9th through the 16th, we hosted an online survey for the neighbors of that park. We took, on August 12th, we took the findings from those efforts to our Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, and we received a recommendation from the commission at that time. So that brings us to today's workshop. We're going to seek council recommendation and consensus to move forward on either option 1 or option 2. Future steps, this is utilizing ARPA funding, so the funding must be encumbered by the end of this calendar year, and the project all the funds must be expended by December 31st of 2026. So this is just a snapshot of the postcard that was mailed to over 1,700 houses within 1 mile of Sierra Verde Park, inviting them to the community meeting on July 9th. At the meeting on July 9th, we presented both options that were also presented during the council workshop in May. Option 1 was to upgrade the LED lighting system of the existing park lighting and also add additional lighting to pathways and ramadas. Would be to upgrade the irrigation system with the new smart technology system, and also to replace the existing playground and shade structures with upgraded equipment. That was option 1. Option 2 that was presented was to remove the existing sand volleyball court and add 2 lighted pickleball courts, and also remove an existing ramada and replace it with new, and also a potential for adding a restroom facility. So those were the 2 options. At the results of that meeting on July 9th was we had 19 attendees signed in. I think I counted 25 at one point in time in the meeting, and we had a very good active group that provided a lot of good feedback during the evening. This was the voting session that they took. Of those 19 that signed in and voted, 17 of them voted for option 1. Only 2 voted for option 2. Only the folks that voted for option 2, which was to add pickleball courts, did we ask them about their interest in including a restroom. And so the 2 that voted for option 2 voted against adding a restroom in that location. As mentioned, the postcard that we mailed out to the neighborhood included a QR code for folks to take an online survey that was open for a week from July 9th through July 16th. The intent was for this survey to be completed by the neighborhood, but we do know that that was shared online, and so there's no way to control exactly where all the participants of the online survey actually resided, just as an FYI. But as the results of that survey, there were 197 responses. 56% or 110 voted for option 1, while 44% or 87 votes voted for option 2. The 87 votes that voted for option 2, the pickleball courts, of those, we asked the question if they would like a restroom, and those did support a restroom, 55% to 45%. Some of the comments that were prevalent in the online survey, because we did ask for a comment section, a lot of comments about the playgrounds being the priority, updating the design as that playground is getting a little bit older and worn out. Also to include swings in the new design. There's also a strong interest in inclusivity, which would be in the playground surfacing compact, as well as the play equipment. Some comments about pickleball. The overall comments were more along the lines of there are other options for pickleball nearby. There was concern about the noise and the extra use that would bring to the park. They did mention that there is room for pickleball in the open space of the park rather than replacing the sand volleyball. And then just comments that pickleball was great for all ages. The overwhelming response during the meeting was against restrooms. There really was no interest in adding restrooms in this particular park. So therefore, quick recap: we completed the engagement meeting, we completed the survey. The Parks Commission at their August meeting voted to recommend moving forward with option 1. So our next steps after today would be that, again, the project would need to be under contract by the end of this calendar year with the funds spent by the end of 2026. We would proceed with the project based on council direction. So with that, I'd be glad to answer questions, and we'd seek consensus on which option would be preferred.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like you to do, normally when you present these things, you always give a location or a map or something for anybody watching this on TV that has no clue where this park's at. Would you give the crossroads?
Yes, so Sierra Verde Park is located at 71st and Rose Garden, just north of the 101 and just west of 67th.
Okay, so that would be Councilmember Tomachoff's district? Okay. Anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I would. Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Mayor. Mr. Kennedy, so I'd like to understand, and I mean, I'm glad that we went to the residents and that the residents weighed in. Clearly, there was not much support for pickleball. I think there were only 2 people at the meeting that finally spoke up. They were kind of afraid to, I think, but they finally spoke up about pickleball. But I'm curious about the additional, is it additional pathways or just additional lighting to the pathways?
Mayor and council members, it's additional lighting along the existing pathways.
Okay, so the basically, I'm looking at the slide on page 3. We're not going to be pouring any concrete or anything out in the field where because those fields are used for soccer practice, like football practice. They're used for a lot of different things. So,
Mayor and council members, that's correct. We would not be utilizing any of the open space. There might be some new connection paths within the existing, between the playgrounds and the Ramanas, but it's either concrete now or, or a DG area. It's not. It wouldn't take up any grass or turf open space.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Councilmember Melner.
Go ahead.
Just on the question that was asked of the survey results, what was the percentage again that said they wanted or the pickleball? What percent wanted pickleball?
Of the online survey was 44% voted for pickleball.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, and then I have one final question. On that survey, do you have any idea, do you know if well, I think you already addressed that a little bit. You have no idea if everybody is citizens of Glendale that filled the survey out. Do you know if they were all Glendale citizens, or are they all in that vicinity of that park where that'll be used? And do you know if there are minors that filled that survey out?
Mayor, we do not know specifics. The survey link was shared with only the residents within a 1-mile radius. However, we do know that, via online, we noticed that it was shared among some public groups in other social media. So that would have allowed anybody to take the survey, age or residency not identified.
All right, well, I'm going to offer a little criticism then. I don't think that that's a healthy way to do it. In my opinion, if we're making those decisions for our taxpayers, I don't know as though our taxpayers should be responsible from somebody outside the district if they're weighing heavily on surveys. So it isn't going to necessarily change my mind on this, but I would think in the future that we need to have some way to ensure that they are Glendale citizens, and literally we want to make sure that we don't have 6-year-olds filling those out also, unless of course it's something that 6-year-olds should be filling out.
Mayor,
Yes,
for purposes of clarification only,
it's very hard to hear you.
I don't know what.
There you
There
go.
it came on. For purposes of clarification, we didn't share the survey out on social media. What Mr. Kennedy is saying is it was shared by other people. So people who received the survey shared it further. That's a little bit more difficult for us to control. What we could do, though, in the future is ask people for their address. However, again, people, they could mislead you. But at least we could add the address or ask them a question like, are you a Glendale resident or something like that, knowing that some people may not be honest about it, but we can add that in the
Yeah,
future.
and the only reason I brought it up is because those numbers are actually very close. And so if it was being skewed by, 10 people that didn't live in the city, that could make a big difference one way or the other. Just a thought. Any other discussions, any other questions? All right, do we have?
Just one other question,
Go ahead.
Mayor, and this is Councilmember Melner again. I was a little surprised that the pickleball wasn't chosen. Were there any comments as to why pickleball was not an option that most of the people wanted?
Mayor, Councilmember Monar, yes, there was quite a bit of discussion during the public meeting. The main concern was the location within the park being so near residents that the unique sound of pickleball is a challenge in a lot of locations. And the residents in that area were quite in tune with that concern. Some of the houses are less than 250 feet from the proposed location of the pickleball courts. So there was concern about the noise. There was also concern about bringing additional traffic into the park and interrupting how the current residents utilize the park from a tranquility standpoint for their walks throughout the day. So those were some of the comments that were the leading comments of the concerns about not choosing pickleball and preferring the playground lights and irrigation option.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Are you asking for council consensus on option 1 or option 2?
Yes.
And what is the staff recommendation?
Mayor, council members, yes, we are asking for consensus on either option 1 or option 2. A staff recommendation would be option 1 would be
All right,
best for this
you.
location.
All right, I do have one other question, and I didn't think of it until you had brought up the location of the proximity, how close the homes are to this area. The lights that are going in, will those be shielded so they're not glaring in on people's homes?
Mayor, yes, the LED lightings are a lot more concentrated lighting where there's very little spillover, and they would be directed to the pathways, the parking lot, and those areas, so it doesn't bleed into homes and windows and other areas.
Okay, well that's something that if they address that as we start, Councilmember Tomachoff or myself don't have to take a lot of phone calls. So
Mayor, one additional point, and they do shut off. They are on a timer where they would shut off after hours.
Okay. All right. So any other questions? If not, do we have a consensus for option 1?
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes.
So we don't even have to go to number 2. So there you go.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Ms. Moreno, item 2, if you would, please.
Bonsall Park North Master Plan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This presentation, I'm going to turn over to Deputy Director Heidi Briga.
Happy fall, Mayor and Council members. It's nice to see you again. I had to say fall, it's September, right? Wanted to talk to you about Bonsall North Park and the timeline with this project. We came to you at the workshop of October 24 in 2023, where we presented the master plan and consensus was given to us to move forward with the design on this park. Here's just a refresher of what the design looked like that was approved to move forward with. When we presented to you in October of 23, we received approval to move forward with the design development. The initial cost of this was $2.9 million, while the available budget was only just over $2.4 million. The direction was to advance to the design phase of this, the design documents, and explore options to either reduce the cost or to identify additional funding. And with that direction is why we're here today. We work with the design consultant to refine the cost estimate, and although the overall scope of the project didn't change much, one significant recommendation that was made during the process is that we rebuild the existing hard surfaces of the park, which is pickleball, tennis, and basketball, rather than just resurfacing them, which was presented in the concept phase. This recommendation stems from the presence of foundational cracks found that would compromise any resurfacing that we did. This is necessitating a complete rebuild with new post-tension concrete foundations. This approach also aligns with our Parks and Rec master plan as the goal of maintaining our existing assets. As a result, in this slight change in scope, you'll see the numbers here on the screen. The approximate cost is now $3.8 million. The available budget is $2.4 million. And the shortfall is actually $1.5 million. I apologize, there was a rounding error and your slide shows 1.4. And again, the factors in this cost increase is to rebuild those sports courts, the foundation, the pickleball, tennis, and basketball. In consulting with our friends at Budget and Finance, they've identified funding available for us to address this shortfall in transfer. With ARPA money, we're looking for consensus to move forward with this new design estimate and transferring the money needed to complete this project. Questions?
Councilmember Clark.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering why we're still retaining the tennis courts. Does anybody use them, and do you have any statistical data that proves that they are being used?
Councilmember Clark and council members, I don't have statistics with me on the use of the tennis courts, but we do know that people do use all of the amenities at the park that are currently open. Our Parks and Rec Advisory Commission talks about going to Bonsall Park. They do play pickleball there, and the chair has mentioned that he sees the open amenities being used.
Well, my thought is you've got looks like 8 pickleball courts. Pickup basketball is very popular, especially among the kids in that area. I would think it would make better sense to convert those tennis courts to more basketball surfaces. It's just a thought. It would change your numbers in terms of funding, but it might drive the cost down a little bit rather than up a little bit. But I would make that recommendation to remove the tennis courts and add additional basketball facilities there for the kids. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councilmember Tomachoff next, and then the district.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. The additional 1.4 million in ARPA funds, is that part of the 6.4 million that's going to be part of the, cost savings from projects? Is that 1.4 included in that 6.4 that's going to be in the next presentation?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, Mr. Gibson is going to give you an ARPA update. And so we did these sort of in this order so that Mr. Kennedy could tell you why we needed an additional 1.5 for the park. And then Mr. Gibson is going to demonstrate to you that we do have that available in ARPA. And yes, it's included, or it will be included in his presentation under the assumption that we would want to move forward with the park and with that additional funding. Otherwise, we would have to go back and rethink some of the amenities in the park, because without that additional 1.5 million, we can't fund those.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Rios. I agree with Councilmember Clark that I'd at least like to see somebody get some data on how much the tennis courts are used, because a lot of kids can play with basketball with one ball, and that's not how tennis works. Everybody has to have a racket. It's something that way more people can do, and especially, honestly, with the demographics in this area, it's something that families wouldn't have to go figure out how to get a tennis racket for their kids and things like that. So at least, I'm not saying that I know the answer to this, but I think it warrants somebody to go out there and see, are people actually using the tennis courts or not? And if they're not, then maybe we should think about putting in more basketball courts, because I mean, basketball is like soccer, is a great game for kids, especially families that are economically challenged, which a lot of people are right now, because all you need is one ball and a lot of kids can play. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
All right. Before I go to you, move your microphone closer. You always turn away from it when you talk. Okay. Mr. Baldonegro.
So, one, thank you for this. It's a great survey, what you guys are planning to do. I remember growing up and playing at the park on 55th and Orangewood, and we called it the fire station, and we would go there, and once we saw that all the racquetball courts are full, or the one basketball court there was too many teams waiting to play, we would go to Rose Lane, and then once we realized, okay, that's all full, then we go to, and we call this Chicken Park, we would go there, and then we realized, okay, now here's somewhere we can go. I know for a fact that when I drive to Walmart on 55th and Northern, there's a small family that plays at the fire station tennis courts. It looks like a dad with like 5 or 6 kids, probably like 10 and younger. And then there's usually like another group on the other tennis courts. I have seen them passing this park coming here to play tennis. And there's a group of like 5 or 6 kids. I don't know if they're all his kids. I don't know if it's a tennis team he's got going. I don't know. But I know that they are also traveling from park to park to find out what's available at that time. It may not be super popular as basketball or pickleball is now, but I think it would be a disservice if we took tennis courts away, making a large assumption that it's just not as popular as the other ones. I think that it is popular still. It's kind of like a small niche type of thing, but also these families or groups are going from park to park to make sure they can find one that's available for them. So I don't necessarily think it would be a good idea to remove a tennis court here, in my opinion, because of how I've seen, especially that one small group going from place to place. Now that I don't play tennis, but doesn't mean that a lot of other people do. It is not as popular maybe as others might think, or especially as much as pickleball is, but I think it's something to consider that I have seen groups going from park to park to make sure they can find courts that are open.
Okay. Councilmember Tom Chuck.
Thank you, Mayor. How's this?
That's better.
What I do is I look over there. So I just want to clarify, Mr. Baldonegro, I'm not suggesting that we remove the tennis courts. I'm just suggesting that we get some information to find out how much are they actually getting used. And with your analogy, that's 5 or 6 people. I mean, that would be good to know. Are they the only 5 or 6 people that are using these 2 tennis courts? I don't know the answer to that. So I think the best way to base decisions on is having all the information we can have. And basketball, I do believe is more popular, especially now. And I also know that not every kid or every family has tennis rackets, tennis balls. Basketballs are pretty easy to come by. So I just don't know if there's a way to have somebody go out there and do some kind of intercept survey, or over the next week or two, maybe just try to find out, are people using these tennis courts or not? How frequently are they getting used? And then we can say, maybe we keep one tennis court and put another basketball court there. Maybe, I don't know what the right answer is, but the more we can serve the community and bring them things that they're actually able to use, I think the better off. I would suspect there's probably people playing pickleball on the tennis courts, honestly, if you have people go out there observing to see what they're doing, because I know that happens places when they'll play pickleball. Pickleball players will play pickleball on a basketball court, on a tent, anywhere they can find an open court, they'll play. So I'd just be curious to know, how are these 2 tennis courts being used?
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Anecdotally, there are 2 basketball courts on 83rd Avenue. When I leave my street, I see them every day, several times a day. Those basketball courts are always used. There are always kids there playing basketball. I would think, in the number of times I've driven by Bonsall Park, and I drive by it quite frequently, I've never seen anybody playing tennis. So I think you have to look at this in terms of what's the greatest good that we're offering. And the greatest good to me, instinctually, are basketball courts. And so I'm with Councilmember Tomachop. Show me the data. Show me that those tennis courts are used appropriately, and I'll support them. But if the data's not there, I think it would be foolish to continue to support them when we could offer greater good to a whole bunch of kids by putting in more basketball courts. Thank you, Mayor.
Let me ask you a question. What's happening to the handball courts?
Mayor and council members, the racquetball courts will be removed during this process.
Okay, so the same footprint is where you plan on putting the newer facilities?
The racquetball court that would be removed, there's going to be a mini pitch at it in that particular area.
A mini
And
what?
A mini pitch, which is a small mini soccer pitch that is built on a harder surface with boundaries around it. It's very popular with with soccer aficionados that look for a smaller space so they don't have to cover quite as much ground. But it's a mini pitch, and then the sand volleyball courts are being slightly relocated from where they currently are. As some additional background, as when the master plan was developed and brought to you a year ago, the interest and the intent at the time was to provide a variety of different amenities to try to re-engage the Bonsall Park, to get the right type of activities there and get families to participate. So that was the reasoning behind why it was trying to offer many different things. It would have pickleball, tennis, basketball, volleyball, and the mini pitch as trying to offer as much as we can to get as much activation. So that was the reasoning behind it. We will certainly follow, any direction, provided. We can look into what it would take. If that's the direction you'd like for us to go, we could see what, I don't anticipate much of a cost savings one way or the other. The main cost is on the post-tension concrete, and that's going to be needed whether it's tennis court or basketball. And the different cost between basketball goals and posts is not all that much different than tennis nets and the post for tennis. So,
At what point do you have to start doing the work in order for the ARPA stuff?
Mayor,
What's our time frame?
Mayor, members of the council. I think what we could do, and sort of to answer your question, is if council's okay with going ahead and transferring in the additional 1.5 million, staff can go back and work on getting some data about use of the tennis courts. And as the next thing that will come to council, assuming we approve this sort of budget, the next thing that will come to council is a contract to actually start building the park. Again, this is an estimate at whatever it is, like 30% design, or how far along are we, John?
we are at 100% design now.
So this would be a change, and we'd have to go back to the contractor and determine change in cost. But as you've said, we can go ahead if we're okay with the budget, and we wouldn't anticipate a huge difference in budget. We can get some of that data and then bring it forward when we bring the contract for approval. And it'll be one choice or the other probably at that point, because we'll need to contract for one or the other. But you'll have another chance to look at it with some data when we bring the contract forward, if you're sort of agreeable and give a consensus to go with this budget now.
Thank you, Mayor. So does this meet, but allocating the additional 1.4 in the budget gap of ARPA money, allocating it to this project meets the obligation of committing the money by the end of this year. Is that correct?
Mayor, members of the council, no. We have to enter a contract before December 31st. So we would have to go back, get this data, incorporate a decision of one way or another that yes, we have data, or no, we don't have data about, we have data that people are using tennis, or no, we don't have data, nobody's using tennis, or not a lot of people are, and then go ahead with something else, such as was suggested, basketball, and then we'd have to enter the contract in order for it to meet the ARPA deadline.
Mayor, I have one more question. Can you go under contract and then find out if there's a change to the cost based on, I agree with you. I don't think the cost difference would be tremendous because they're pretty much the same size. What can we go under contract, and then obviously you can do change orders to contracts.
Mayor, members of the council, that's what I'm sort of suggesting. If we get the data and we know then with the contract that we're going to go in a different direction, if the cost is substantially higher, we'd be with the contract asking you for an additional budget. If not, we'd just be going ahead with the same budget and asking for, but revising in the contract whether we're going to do tennis or basketball.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is not rocket science. We just built a contract with option A or option B. Option A includes the tennis courts. Option B increases the number of basketball courts. It's not that big a deal. As long as we get the money encumbered and we get the contract settled before the end of the year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I know when I was in the late 1900s, when I was a teenager and playing all the time at Roseland Park and then come playing here, I will put my hand on a stack of Bibles. I never played during the day, no matter what time of year it was. So if we're gathering information at noon or 4 or 5 p.m., it's going to be skewed as opposed to 7 p.m. and on. I want to make sure that we also gather the data at those various times, because never once I've ever been there playing basketball during, maybe when the sun was barely out for another 30 minutes, but it was always when the sun went down. And if we're taking a real snapshot of it, it should be when the people are there enjoying the facilities. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. I know what you're talking about with the basketball courts, especially when the temperature gets down below 2,000 degrees.
Yeah.
You'll see, I want to say hundreds, but probably dozens and dozens and dozens of people standing at the courts waiting for their opportunity to play.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that the people that play tennis don't and shouldn't be as deserving in order to use the facilities too. If we go ahead and at least give the approval to adopt potential amount of money, and if it works out where after a couple of weeks they don't see enough people using tennis and the council decides they don't want to go that route, at least we've already got that out of the way. So can we get a consensus? Did you need to talk? You do need to talk. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mayor, a couple of things for consideration then on this. One, any kind of information we would get in the short term would just really be anecdotal, which may be valuable to the council, but it would be hard to do a more longer survey if you really were concerned about the use. But two, the council has a park advisory committee. And, the other option would be is to reach out to your park advisory committee members and to see if they've got a recommendation or feel for what kinds of amenities. To kind of echo what Mr. Kennedy said, is the concept after going through the Parks Commission and talking about master planning was to try to offer a variety of amenities rather than some of our parks kind of focus on only a few of the amenities. So then in terms of the process, it would be difficult to enter into a construction contract without the design being finalized. So a step in between then would also be that if the council chooses to move to basketball, we would probably need to re-engage with our designer so that we can get the exact dimensions and the quantities so that we can actually bid it out. So there's a couple of steps in between here, but I think we could be back at our next workshop with at least information from observation that staff has done regarding the use of the tennis courts, and have a chance perhaps to reach out to the Parks Advisory Committee members to see if they have any strong feelings and report back to you in 2 weeks of the next workshop. But as Ms. Rio said, I think the main thing would be today would be to start giving the assurance that we have the budget to work with, and that gives us also some targets within design if you decide to modify from going from tennis to expanded basketball.
Okay. So I think you just almost said the same thing I was saying. If
said.
we can at least get the budget figured out now. One of the things that you brought up that I didn't hear you say is, did the Parks and Recreation, did they make a recommendation?
Mayor, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission did approve the master plan as presented that included tennis, pickleball, and basketball as the hard court.
Okay. Well,
options.
and me personally, if I really don't seem to have much of a dog in the fight I tend to lean towards the council member's district. Mr. Baldenegro's the youngest person here, so he probably has a better memory of tennis and basketball and things like that in his district than I think any of us would. But now, if we can get the money part done now, I get a recommendation, or at least have some other people look at whether we need to shift a little bit or not, or leave it as it is. I think if we can get that, at least we're making some headway. What I don't want to do is slow the process down. This has already been in the makings for a while, and I think his constituents deserve something, so we want to keep moving forward. But
There was one more, we had a meeting about lights for that, the runway. Any info on that?
Mayor and council member, yes, there will be some pathway lighting along that quote-unquote runway leading up to and behind the F-100.
okay. So is there a consensus? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Good? Good? Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Moreno, item 3, if you would, please.
American Rescue Plan update.
Mayor, members of the council, here to provide staff update will be Levi Gibson, Director of Budget and Finance, and Amy Lindsay, our Assistant Director of Budget and Finance.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We're here today to give you a little bit of an update on the American Rescue Plan. This is our presentation for today. We'll go and give a brief background of ARPA. We'll talk and remind you of the ARPA strategy that was adopted when we initially received ARPA, and then we'll talk some next steps. So just as a reminder, the City of Glendale received just over $59 million in funding under the ARPA program. The first amount, which was just under $30 million, was received in May of 2021, and we received the final distribution in May of 2022. This money is for eligible costs incurred by the city between March 3rd of 2021 and December 31st of 2024. And it's important to note that funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and the United States Treasury has defined the term obligated as meaning an order placed for property and services or entering into contracts, subawards, and similar transactions that require payment. And then all funds must be expended by that December 31st, 2026 deadline. ARPA has been one of the most complex and interesting federal programs that I've had the opportunity to work with in my career. It's first, as we noted, we received funding in 2021, but U.S. Treasury issued the first set of rules, which was titled the Interim Final Rule for ARPA uses on April 1st, 2022, about a year after we received funding. In December 29, 2022, the Congress amended the legislation, which was the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Act, that granted us the opportunity to use those funds and provided a little more flexibility. In November of 2023, Treasury again issued an obligation interim final rule, which actually defined and clarified what the term obligated meant. And then in March 29th of this year, 2024, they amended the frequently asked questions or facts that provided additional guidance on ARPA spending and granted cities, towns, counties, and states a little more flexibility with ARPA. So this program has consistently changed over time, but it has been to the benefit of the cities and towns because it's given us more flexibility. Back in 2021, we discussed that we would use ARPA funds on eligible operating and capital expenditures known at the time the funding was initially received. Additionally, we would use ARPA funds for eligible future operating and capital expenditures as the rules were issued by the U.S. Treasury. One of those categories is known as lost revenue. The City of Glendale did not experience any lost revenue under the methodology that the U.S. Treasury established to calculate, but they did allow us to use the lost revenue category to spend on any governmental purpose. And really that's can be kind of analogous to the standard deduction on your personal income tax return. They said you can use up to $10 million to pay for any governmental purpose, even if you didn't experience a lost revenue. However, it still retains its category as federal funds, and we are audited on it as part of our single audit. Additionally, this year, new rules were set by Treasury that allowed us to fund positions past that December 31st, 2024 date, as long as the positions were hired before the December 31st, 2024 date. So we have a little bit more flexibility for funding positions. As you remember, these are the categories that ARPA identified, and they were to help with public health, negative economic impacts due to COVID, public health, negative economic impacts, infrastructure, and administrative. And you can see the budgets there. We initially established the $59.5 million. To date, we have spent $29.3 million, and we have about $30 million remaining to spend. These are the actual categories and actual expenditures that have happened to date. $4.6 million in public health. Those were initially spent early in the receipt of these funds and closer to the pandemic. That was vaccination clinics, incentives, custodial services, things to keep us healthy here at the city. Additionally, we had negative economic impacts for just over $10 million. That was used to help Camelback Ranch and the arena due to the downturn in the economy because of COVID. We also did a lot of playground equipment and parks projects. We had public health negative economic impacts, and we did retention pay, COVID leave, temp pay for recreation staff to rehire. A lot of staff was paid for at the aquatic centers, and then we did referral and hiring bonuses to try and get back folks as we were competing with others. Additionally, we've completed or are completing some infrastructure projects. That's the Glen Drive Drainage Project, Parks Irrigation Projects, and Recreation Center projects. And we did not use any of the dollars for administrative. That's been totally handled by Budget and Finance. With that, I'll turn over the presentation to Ms. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. These next two slides list some of the projects that have been funded with some of the ARPA funding. This slide lists several of the parks projects that have either been completed or are in the process of being completed. I won't list all of them. That'll take a while, but there's several parks on there that we've been able to complete. We've also been able to complete splash pads and some refurbishments of splash pads, some lighting improvements at Saguaro Ranch Park, improvements to the community centers, capital repairs at the arena, and some IT projects. These next few slides will show the before and after of some of the projects that are listed on the previous slides. This slide is the before photo of the playground at Sunset Park before the improvements that were funded with the ARPA funding. And this slide shows the completed project at Sunset Park after the ARPA funding was completed. This next one is an irrigation project that was done at Hillcrest Park. This is the before picture. And as you can see, the after picture is significantly improved. It's a much greener landscape at this point. Before picture of Lions Park Playground. And the after picture of Lions Park Playground, there were significant improvements, including shade structures and new playground equipment. So for this particular slide, the before and after pictures at Mary Silva Park are actually on the same slide. The pictures on the left are the before the lighting project was completed, and the pictures on the right are after the lighting project was completed. So you can see how it's significantly much more lighting on the right-hand side. And then these pictures are the Glen Drive Drainage Project that's been taking place out here on Glen Drive. It is significantly complete. My understanding from talking to engineering today is that there's a few manhole covers to replace, and then once that's done, that project will be complete. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Gibson.
So, as you know, we need to obligate these funds, and we have some projects that are currently underway, and these are the remaining funds associated with those projects. First is the largest one is Heroes Regional Park Build-Out at $12.3 million. Then we have park improvement projects at $3.7, parks and recreation staffing at $1.9, And then we have parks irrigation projects at 1.5 million. Additionally, we have some smaller things to complete as part of the Glen Drive drainage improvements at 1.3. We have some IT projects at 650,000, lighting improvements at parks, one more splash pad, and then we've had some HVAC improvements and parks and recreation operating budget. So to date, we've spent $29.3 million. We have $30.1 million of unspent ARPA, and our total ARPA funding, as a reminder, was just under $60 million at 59.5. So currently our unspent ARPA funding is $30.1 million. We've obligated of that $23.7 million and have an unobligated ARPA funding amount of $6.4 million. And that includes savings from completed projects. That includes projects that haven't started and won't start on time in order to obligate this funding. So today we are looking for consensus, and this is because the U.S. Treasury requires all ARPA funds to be fully obligated by December 31st, 2024, and fully expended by December 31st, 2026. It's our goal to not return any money back to the U.S. Treasury for this program. So therefore, we're looking for consensus to direct any remaining ARPA funds that are unobligated as follows. First, as you heard under Mr. Kennedy's project, $1.5 million to Bonsall Park North Improvement Project, $500,000 to Police Evidence Storage Project to help the police department obtain the things they need to operate that facility, and allocate the remaining amount to the Heroes Park Ballfields project to replace general fund cash that was allocated to the project. And as a reminder, the cash returned to the general fund would be reinvested based on council priorities as part of the upcoming budget process. And with that, we'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? We have a consensus?
Mayor, I have a question. How much, so I was gonna do the math, how much cash would that be that would go back to the general fund? About 4 million?
Just under 4 million.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a consensus?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Okay. There you go.
Thank you.
Ms. Moreno, item 4, if you would.
Initiative 2023-001.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Let me just get situated here for a second. Before you, you should have a PowerPoint presentation, and you also have a copy of the actual initiative. As we go through this, what I will be speaking about, I've referenced the section in the actual initiative, so if you have any questions that come about, please let me know. And in doing so, if you'll reference the section, I will do my best to answer those questions, of course, with the caveat that what we're speaking about is an initiative that's amending the Glendale City Code. It'll amend Article 7, Chapter 21, relating to minimum wage and worker protection. And as of the date of this presentation, the initiative is on the November 5th ballot. The reason why we're doing this today is because we've received questions from the public, also the press, regarding what is the content of this initiative. And so this is that opportunity where we are going to speak about that. This is intended to be an information-only session. As you may recall, this is very similar to a let's say a bond or a bond initiative where we cannot endorse or influence the outcome, and so that is why the focus of this will be information only, and to provide the council and the public with factual information regarding the initiative. We are not going to be taking any action. I will be not asking for any consensus, and as we move forward, we will not participate in debate. Noting that, let's dive right into it.
Yeah, hold on one second.
I do have one question, Mayor. Mr. Bailey, you said basically for the interest of the public, and I've been asked about this also, is this going to be uploaded to the agenda so people can access it? The PowerPoint, or somebody going to do, I mean, not right now, but I mean, this is the record. So I would like to make sure that this does get attached to the item on the agenda so people can access it that have questions about it.
Mayor and
If that's
Councilmember
possible.
Tolmachoff, that is correct. We will provide that. We will also be providing a factual-based page on the internet that if people want to know more about this, they can receive that information there. Very similar, again, as I've indicated, to a city-initiated bond. We did this exercise, I think, about 6-7 months ago. So very similar.
Mr. Bailey, if I could interrupt before you actually get started. Here.
I didn't hear what your question was.
Okay. I haven't stated it yet.
You have a question for Mr. Bailey. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you. Actually, more of a point of information, I suppose. It's my understanding that the initiative is available on the city clerk's part of the city's overall website. I do still think it ought to be attached to our meeting agenda today for future reference, but if anybody's watching now and wants to see it, then I'm told that it's on the clerk's portion of the City of Glendale website.
Thank you, and I also believe it is attached to the agenda item. So if there's anybody that's watching and they can follow along, it's not the PowerPoint presentation, but it is the actual initiative. Okay, noting this, Mayor and Council, what we're speaking about today is an initiative that has been deemed relating to minimum wage and worker protection regarding event centers and hotels. And I'm going to walk you through the content and what we believe is the meaning of this initiative that's going to be before the voters of the City of Glendale. And again, you have in front of you the actual language, and I'm going to model my comments after that. The initial section provides the purpose, and that is why it is being proposed. And again, it's to regulate the minimum wages and benefits of hotel and event center employees within the city's geographic boundaries. So importantly, as we go through this will deal strictly with event centers and hotels. So what becomes important is what is an event center, and then what is a hotel, and what is the minimum wage, because that is the substance of this. Section 187 provides what an event center is. And this is the definition, an event center means a publicly or privately owned structure in the city of more than 20,000 square feet that is used for public performances, sporting events, business meetings, or similar events. An event center includes, so that's a fairly expansive definition, but is not limited to concert halls, stadiums, sports arenas, racetracks, coliseums, and convention centers. Noting that we've looked from a practical sense as to what will this apply to. And if you look at this, there's simply 3 elements to it. And that is it public or private? So that's very broad-based. It includes all public and private. Is it a structure of more than 20,000 square feet? And then is it used for public performances, sporting events, business meetings, or similar events? Noting that, we've done an analysis that speaks to what would qualify under this. And while we have not gone through every single building, we wanted to get an idea of what would be impacted. Noting that clearly the Desert Diamond Arena, the Glendale Civic Center, the State Farm Stadium, high school football stadiums, movie theaters, and other event centers around the city, including those that may be privately owned and that are rented out as a whole, which could include country clubs, the Great Lawn, and also special event hospitality structures that would be greater than 20,000 square feet. All of those would qualify as an event center and would be subject to this.
Question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bailey, so for example would be Paseo Racket Center, where they don't always have events there, but they do have events there. would that fall under this category? Their day-to-day is not really an event center, but they do have tennis tournaments there, and I would imagine the facility's well over 20,000 square feet. Would that,
Mayor and council, based on the definition and when it speaks to it's including but not limited to, we believe that structures that are greater than 20,000 square feet, such as the Paseo Racket Center, when rented out as an entire facility, would be subject to this.
all right, thank you.
If the event center does meet the definition, the initiative then provides that the minimum wage for the event center will be $20 an hour for all event center workers, and this does not include tips, gratuities, service charges, and bonuses. There's a separate section that deals with other charges that we'll talk about, but importantly, $20 an hour is the minimum wage. There's also the requirement that there will be an annual COLA increase to the minimum wage, which is the greater of 3% or the preceding CPI increase for the urban wage earner and clerical workers. And again, as I mentioned, it does not include tips, gratuities, service charges, service charge distributions, and bonuses, and we'll talk about that as that's in a different section of the initiative as well.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Mr. Bailey, I want to go back for a minute about locations, and I just want to clarify, because I've been thinking about it. Would high school gyms be included in this definition, do you think?
The definition before you is the definition that I am faced with. And when I read it, I find that it's quite expansive, and to the extent that it's public or private, and it's greater than 20,000 square feet, which would include the elements, if in fact a high school gymnasium, auditorium, or football field, which are all potentially of that size, were in fact greater than 20,000 square feet, I believe this is that facility would meet the structure definition.
Okay, so if they're greater than 20,000 square feet, there is a good chance they would be included in this definition. What about churches? Like, we have a couple of mega churches in Glendale. Would they be included as well?
Mayor and council, again, looking at the definition and trying to take what I would say in accordance with how it's been written expansively in what would be a reasonable definition, that if it is intended to be a concert hall, a stadium, a sports arena, a racetrack, a coliseum, or a convention center, where there are public performances, sporting events, business meetings, or similar events, then yes. But solely as a church, I believe that would probably not fall within that definition for if they were performing religious services. However, if it's a building that actually is available for rental, where church services are performed, but also is available for public performances and business meetings or similar events, I believe it would.
Thank you. I appreciate that information.
The next element of this initiative deals with hotels. And again, I have the definition, and that's section 187, like I indicated. All of these are taken directly from the initiative measure that's been provided. The hotel definition is very expansive, and you can see that, again, it's hotels, motor lodges, motels, apartment hotels, transient residential structures, private residential clubs, tourist courts, hotels, and private guest rooms that may be reserved, meeting the hotel definition. Again, we looked at this, and while it is very expansive, our initial interpretation of it is that it does not apply to VRBOs or individual residential rental units. However, it does apply to all of the other hotels, motels, other elements that have been set forth in this definition. And this can be important because all hotels that actually fall within this definition are required to pay, again, the $20 minimum wage per hour for all employees. One note of that is the exception is that does not include supervisory or managerial employees as well. So noting that hotels, in terms of the working conditions that they put forth and minimum wages, they have some additional language.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bailey, so I didn't know what a transient residential structure was, so I looked it up, and it says the rental of any building or portion thereof for the purpose of providing lodging for compensation for periods of 30 days or less. That sounds like a short-term rental to me, doesn't it?
Mayor and council member, it does, but we're also looking at what our current code defines and how we address that. And so at this point in time, that was our interpretation. However, that is something that is that a reasonable definition? And could a reasonable person come to that conclusion based on this definition? You are correct. Noting hotels, for the wages and benefits, hotels with fewer than 60 guest rooms, the employer shall not require a room attendant to clean more than 4,000 square feet in an 8-hour workday unless the employer pays a premium pay, which is double the pay rate for each and every hour during that workday. And the double pay rate would be $40 an hour, because that would be double the minimum wage. For hotels with greater than 60 guest rooms, the employer shall not require a room attendant to clean more than 3,500 square feet in an 8-hour day unless the employer pays premium pay, which is, again, $40 an hour for each and every hour during that workday.
Mayor, I have a question about this because this is really kind of funky to me. Okay, Lauren and I are cleaning the hotel. Takes Lauren the entire 8 hours to clean 3,500 square feet. But I'm really fast, so I clean the 3,500 square feet in 4 hours. So the question becomes, and maybe you can answer this, but do I get paid for the full 8 hours, even though it only took me 4 hours to clean that 3,500 square feet?
Mayor and council, if you'll hold your question until I go through the rest of the language, I think you may have an answer.
All right. Thank you.
In addition to the square footage requirements, if during an 8-hour workday a room attendant is required to clean a combination of 6 or more special attention rooms, and the special attention room is a room where somebody is either checking out or it's a guest room for which the occupant declined daily room cleaning on the immediately preceding day, or additional bedrooms, the total amount of square footage for the premium pay shall be reduced by 500 square feet. And so there's somewhat of a mathematical equation for what rate will apply, noting that to the extent that it exceeds the square footage requirement, that it would be required, that the hotel would be required to pay premium pay. Noting all this, there are other elements in Section 188 that if a room attendant is required to clean floor space in more than one hotel building, the total workload limitation shall also be reduced by 500 square feet for each additional building. So that means if, from what I interpret this, is that if they're to clean floor space in the hotel that is not rooms, then they would also have a workload limitation reduced by 500 square feet. The limitations apply to any combination of guest rooms, meeting rooms, and other rooms in the hotel, and the maximum floor space shall be reduced on a prorated basis if a room attendant works less than 8 hours a day, and shall be increased if working in excess of 8 hours a day, and calculated if the room attendant is cleaning jointly with another room attendant.
Mr. Bailey, say that again in English for me.
You didn't write it.
Plain English.
I'm trying. My understanding is that the way this is written is that the square footage, depending on the hours worked, would be calculated not only based individually if they're working individually, but also jointly as well.
So we still haven't gotten to the answer to my question yet, right?
I think the issue would be is that a worker is paid for the work they were doing, or for the square footage that they are to do with a minimum of 8 hours.
The worker is paid for the work that they do, and they can only do so much work under this law.
Correct.
So if I do it faster, but I've done the amount of square footage, then I get paid for the whole day.
That would seem to be what the ordinance says, yes.
So it looks like...
However, it also says that there'll be a reduction on a prorated basis if the room attendant works less than 8 hours a day. So it would be reduced as well.
So it would be, my pay would be reduced, and I would be penalized for being a faster cleaner.
Well, you can go home early, you just don't get paid extra.
What?
You can go home early, you just don't get paid extra.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You know, yeah, that would be an incentive for me to work slower, yeah.
Additionally, a hotel employer shall not require or permit a hotel worker to work more than 10-hour days in a workday unless consented to by the employee after notice in writing. And that noting with regards to these rules that the hotel shall maintain at least 3 years of records and make them available for inspection and copying to any hotel worker or designated representative. So to summarize up to this point, that hotel workers and event center workers will be paid a minimum wage of $20. Hotel workers, it will be based on what we discussed as it relates to the size of the hotel and the size of the workload. As I indicated, speaking about minimum wage, it does not include service charges, tips, and other fees. There is a section specifically 21-190 that speaks that all service charges shall be distributed to the event center and the hotel employee, and no portion of those to be paid to supervisory or managerial. All service charges must be disclosed with clean and conspicuous notice. The hotel or event center shall disclose in writing its plan of distributing and how the service charges will be distributed, and they must be paid on the next payroll unless cash. And if it's cash, it must be distributed on the same day. There's no deduction for credit card charges, and there's a 3-year record retention requirement, and this does not include tips. As to the enforcement, there are sections regarding a waiver and supersession. Under 21-191, a 1-year waiver may be granted if compliance with this law would require the employer, in order to avoid bankruptcy or a shutdown of the hotel or event center, to reduce its workforce by more than 20% or curtail its workers' total work hours by more than 30%. Additionally, the regulations regarding working conditions and wages in this initiative may be waived pursuant to a bona fide collective bargaining agreement. And then, as is the case in many of these initiatives, retaliatory acts by the employer are prohibited. Of note to the city is that effective June 1st, 2025, the city will create a Department of Labor standards, appoint investigators, and promulgate regulations. Effective June 1st of 2025, the city shall create an online and paper method for individuals to file complaints. And then the Labor Department is authorized to engage in rulemaking consistent and in furtherance of the new law. In plain language, this means that the city will be forming a new department. It is a Department of Labor. It will engage in rulemaking, and it will also have methodology to investigate, review, and assess penalties with regards to this ordinance.
Mayor?
Good.
No one has talked about cost estimates for this little gem here. And I think it would be helpful if there would be a way that we could figure out what the anticipated cost to the city and to the taxpayers is of creating a new regulatory department. And I don't know how you do it, but I would probably take the smallest department the city has and use that as a baseline for what the anticipated costs would be. Yes.
Mayor and council, when the city is faced with initiatives, we are able to do an analysis that looks at what the impacts are, and we will share these impacts as well. And we have made the determination based on the ordinance, the initiative, that the anticipated costs to form the department to comply with all of the notice requirements, which includes printing posters of this, that it is approximately $1 million.
Wow.
And that would be an ongoing expenditure.
Thank you. I appreciate knowing that.
Mr. Bailey, this is real concerning to me. The one that you just did, I think it's the one that's up there right now. Yeah. Labor Department's authorized to engage in rulemaking consistent in furtherance of the new law. Engage in rulemaking, does that mean that they are going to be coming up with new codes that will be enforced? I thought that was the council's job. And
Mayor,
how do we give away our authority as duly elected officers on new rules, new codes to someone else that's an employee, not an elected official?
Mayor and council, the council has an ability to delegate certain functions. In this case, the rulemaking would be to interpret or provide clarification, I believe, in terms of when this is actually provided to the voters. That's about all you can get out of me right now, Mayor.
Yeah, I noticed you were. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Bailey, you said the $1 million, that would include creating a department. I know somewhere in here it said something about a director. So I imagine, I guess, in order to be compliant, the city would have to have a director and a department, investigators who would need, city vehicles to be able to go out and conduct these investigations and all of this, and what other kind of electronics, phones, whatever else they would need. And that $1 million includes all of that?
Mayor and council, I did not do this exercise on my own, so I would ask Ms. Rios if she'd provide some feedback on this.
So yes, Mayor and Council, I did that analysis. What I did is I based it on our tax group, our tax audit group. except that the ordinance calls for a director over tax audit. We have more of an administrator. So I use the average salary of a director. I added in an admin for the director because usually they needed someone to help them administratively. 4 wage investigators that I modeled after the cost of our sales tax auditors. Yes, I included vehicles, computers, supplies, professional education, office supplies, fuel. And so I estimated about $176,000 to get the department started, which was the one-time cost of those things like computers and vehicles and that type of thing. And then estimated, as Mr. Bailey said, about $1 million in ongoing cost. That's in today's dollars. That doesn't include like escalations for inflation or anything like that in the future.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, excuse me. With regard to the Department of Labor, the city will have an enforcement power to access all records applicable to this ordinance from the employers, noting that if the access is not provided, that the workers' records shall be presumed accurate. There's a civil penalty of up to $100 per day to be paid to the hotel or event center worker for any violation. Violations shall not exceed $1,000 per day per employer. Additionally, there are statutory damages equal to the $100 and $1,000 per day that will also be paid to the hotel or event center worker. And with regard to city enforcement, there will be a 3-year statute of limitations. And then finally, this legislation proposes a private cause of action. What this means is that any party impacted by the law may have the right to sue. There is a 3-year statute of limitations. There is also the civil penalty of $100 and then also the $1,000. Notably, it also provides that in the event that an employee is successful, that the court will award attorney's fees and costs as well. But that would be to the prevailing party and could also go to the employer if they prevailed. It's a prevailing attorney fee award. But it is a private cause of action, so to the extent that the city or the Department of Labor doesn't initiate an action, a private party would be able to do that as well.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Bailey, so would the city be the enforcement agency? For example, say, you know, the civil penalties, 100, I don't know, some hotel or event centers assessed penalties. Maybe they didn't have the records, so the way I understand it then is the workers' records are presumed accurate, and they start racking up penalties, and whatever the hotel or event center says, I'm not paying. And then is the city required now to be the enforcer here?
Yes, the city is the enforcer via the Department of Labor, that they are intended to be the enforcer, and if not, there's also a private cause of action that a private party could then initiate an action against the employer.
But would the expectation be, Vice Mayor, if I can continue?
Yes.
Thank you. But would the expectation be that the city, rather than the Department of Labor, is the enforcement entity here? Is that the way, do I understand that correctly?
Yes, Mayor and Councilor, I may sound repetitive, but yes, the primary enforcement arm would be the city's Department of Labor.
The city's department, not the Arizona Department of Labor, but the city's Department of Labor.
Correct. Correct.
And then that would be, there would have to be some sort of, you know, path of prosecution or whatever else would be, that would entail, right?
The actions are civil actions. They are not criminal actions, but they are civil actions. But
like code or something like that.
Mayor and Council, I think, yes, it would be akin to yes, I think it's akin to that.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So let me ask the $64,000 question. Is there any other city within this state that currently mandates $20 an hour be paid to hospitality workers?
Mayor and council, the purpose of this was specifically to speak to what the substance of the initiative is. We have not looked nor compared ourselves to other cities. That is something that we may undertake in terms of trying to understand the meaning of some of this, but at this point in time, no.
So
We do not have I don't have an answer for you.
You don't have an answer. I am going to assume, and I think I assume correctly, there's no other city that would be under this kind of mandate. So let me ask, I don't know if this question would go to Ms. Rios or Mr. Phelps, but if this were to pass, would this put a damper on our ability to attract new hotel development or even new entertainment development in our entertainment district? Doesn't this put a damper on all of that?
Mayor, members of the council, it's probably, premature to know definitively, but take the West Valley, we are literally, take our entertainment district. If you draw a half-mile radius around us, we actually touch both Phoenix and Peoria. If you draw a 1.5-mile radius, we touch Avondale. We start getting towards Avondale as well. And so those would be 3 cities that would not have this initiative impacting their properties, but could still be essentially serving the west side and the entertainment district. So I think it's least reasonable to project that it may have some impact, but I think it would take more discussion with developers to see exactly how they would interpret this.
Thank you. I appreciate that information.
Mayor, thank you. Would this also apply to hotel workers, but for example, restaurants that are inside a hotel and bars that are inside a hotel and other things that you would find, spas and other services that you find inside a hotel? Hotels are just not, a lot of hotels are not just, rooms and housekeeping. There's a lot of other amenities in the hotel. Would this apply to every single employee inside of a hotel?
Mayor and council, the hotel worker definition means any person who is employed by a hotel employer to provide services at a hotel. Hotel worker does not include managerial, supervisory, or confidential employees as defined by the National Labor Relations. Does not include turn-down service or tasks associated with preparing already made beds when not accompanied by other room cleaning tasks. It does not include activities such as repair, replacement, and general maintenance of appliances, electronics, furniture, doors, windows, carpets, walls, plumbing, and other fixtures. Noting that definition, and taking into account the entirety of the ordinance that it's directed at hotel and event center workers, I believe this does not apply to restaurants. And that may include restaurants in the hotel. And that's based on the definition.
Even if it's a hotel, a Marriott, it's Marriott Hotel, Marriott, the hotel bar, lobby bars, things like that. Those are all hotel employees. It's so confusing. I can only imagine, I imagine that this is all gonna, I can't say anything about the actual initiative.
Mayor and council, I think we're done with the presentation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be before you, and I appreciate the uniqueness of this presentation where we've tried to keep it very factual. As we continue to analyze this, that I will provide updates in that regard. Also, we can look at what the impacts are, and as we determine what more of the impacts are, we will share those as well in the regular course of operations, as we always do in that regard.
Yeah, my point is that the language is so broad that I've read this and it's so broad, it's really hard to understand where it stops and where it starts. That's what the point I was trying to make. I do have one question, Michael, just and I want to say this publicly before we move on, is there any provision for a hardship for a business? It's a 29% raise. It's a I mean, it could present a real hardship for smaller venues, mom and pop places like that. Is there any way for them to say this is going to, or do they just have to go out of business?
So, Mayor and Council, there's a limited waiver, which speaks that a 1-year waiver can be granted in order to avoid bankruptcy or a shutdown of the hotel or event center to reduce its workforce by more than 20% or curtail its workers' total more than work hours by more than 30%. And that's in the Section 191. And then also to the extent that the entity enters into a collective bargaining agreement with its employees, then they would not be bound by this law. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Item 5.
Downtown Campus Reinvestment Project Update.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, since we didn't have meetings in July and we vacated one of our meetings in August, I'm going to change the sequence of our DCRP presentation. So I'd like to, lots been going on since our last update. So the first site here, you can see again, the construction site is fully activated. Notice there on the right side of the picture that the water project has been completed. That part of Glen Drive had been shut down for some period of time. In the next slide, one of the things that really speaks to our general contractor, Oakland Construction, they've actually replicated on site the entire essentially frames and skin assembly for how the exterior walls will be attaching to the building. This gives them an opportunity. You can see the discussion that's going on the right side. It allows them really to address issues about how water will drain off to make sure the design is well. And so they'll be able to hang the actual material, mount it, see what the issues are regarding that. And so this is something that we saw that when we toured the different construction companies, this is one of the approaches that Oakland Construction really focused on during the RFP or the RFQ part of the solicitation. And so again, that's already on site. And again, you can see there's a lot of elements to just hanging an exterior wall system onto this building. And again, this is going to help assure that what we do will have the effect that we want, and we won't have, future councils and future city management won't have issues 20 years from now of, bad water leaks only to find because it was a bad design to begin with. As you recall, we had a slight increase to the budget in our June meeting, and one of the things we mentioned was that the amount of steel reinforcement that was needed once we got into design was significantly more than we originally had estimated. So our architect has actually done a cross section. Everything that you see here in this diagram represents all of the new steel that will be going into this building. So this shows you there is a tremendous amount of structural and other types of steel that will help make up the envelope and the building once it's completed. And so that's a great representative. And so we've already received some of the flat iron and lintels that are there. The different steel packages will be arriving on site as we assemble them. So right now, the things we're doing most would be preparing the slab edge. And so that work is being done, and then it will progressively, more and more steel will be added on in a sequence that makes sense for that. There's a lot of saw cutting that is taking place. So if you look at the large opening on the picture on the right, that used to be a window very similar to the window to the right of it. And this actually is the clerk's space that is there. And this is an example of just one of the large window openings that are being cut in to make sure that we really have ample light on our main garden level. And so there's been a lot of saw cutting that has been taking place. And then inside the building, we positioned a new elevator. So we are also going to be cutting in to provide the elevator. You have to go down about 3 or 4 feet. That's where the springs and the different components of the elevator when it comes to a landing. And so that work's being done. And then it's a little bit hard to pick out, but on the picture on the right, all along the basement level, they are creating a trough that's a concrete will be taken out. And then that will be where we will put all of our new plumbing and sewer and different utility infrastructure. And so that work is ongoing as well. We also mentioned that we had to, one of the things that drove to increasing the budget was that APS had told us we had to move our main electrical service so that it could be easily accessible to the outside. So what you see here now is this used to be where on the lower level of the garage. So most of the council parked just on that part of the garage, but on the right, to the right of that worker. So what you can see here is we've already trenched that out, and then you can see where they're starting to lay all the new electrical conduit that will go from the service area back into the building. Again, this was work that was not anticipated originally, but as we got into the design, it became required. So the next here, again, this is a preparation. If you can go back one, please. I don't know. Yeah, thank you. This is preparation for all of the electrical equipment. So that's on the south side of the basement level of the garage. And so again, you may not see it when you drive by, but there's been a lot of work by the construction company getting ready for the things like the electrical service and all of the steel. And so the schedule right now is the contractor will be installing the structural steel really through November. We'll do a tentative topping out gathering, which will be the last highest piece of steel that we'll be putting on top of the roof of the building. We'll include the council in some kind of a signature event where you can sign the last piece of the steel that's going up. And we're still on track for providing the Velmatig study at a council workshop in October. Just as a reminder, we are looking to see whether or not it would make sense to relocate the library, and so that we can then just kind of have Murphy Park be Murphy Park. So Gene Marino has been engaged with a team of people looking at this, and we'll have that report back to the council in October. If the council's going to contemplate, relocating the library, we'll need to start making some decisions relatively soon, only because we want to keep the schedule online so that we can complete the remodel of the new library and move into it so that we can then vacate the existing library and tear it down, but do it in a sequencing that it's all kind of conducive to the redevelopment of the park. Because that's we want to do those in sequence and do them in parallel. So it's a busy fall coming up. We'll continue to give additional updates. It may require that we do these more than just once a month, and so we'll continue to see when we think there's more information to share. We will be glad to increase that, so we're updating every workshop for an update. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Right. Can you pull your microphone down?
Sounded pretty loud in my head. Okay. I appreciate the schedule for the structural steel and tentative topping out and all of that. In the scheme of the whole project, are we on track, lagging a little? What would you say?
Great. Thank you for the question. We did mention back in June when we kind of did the last kind of budget adjustment, that we felt that the new timeline had gone from December of 25 to late January, February of 26, and we believe we're still on that schedule, but the contractor, if at all possible, will try to make up ground between now and then, but right now that schedule has not slipped from our last kind of estimation. Councilmember Turner.
Thank you.
Questions? No one? Okay. All right.
Mayor, I'm sorry, I do have a question. I wasn't aware that the idea or the possibility of demoing the library and relocating it was public now, but I guess based on what you said, that information now is public.
Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Tomachef, I don't recall that being something that we've tried to not discuss publicly. Certainly our staff has known about it at the library, and we've engaged. So, but this is, but we think that the October workshop we'll know whether or not our concept will work, and then that's really, we think, a more appropriate time to really do a more robust engagement with the city.
Okay,
Citizens.
very good. I mean, the survey's been out there. The survey doesn't directly address that notion, but I have been asked and have not said, because the only place I heard about it was an executive session. So I just wanted to be clear that it's obviously people now will know that that's at least a possibility. Thank you.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that was my impression too, is that we weren't going to go public with it until we were ready to do a rollout of the idea and in a public forum and meeting to hopefully answer as many questions as possible right up front. So I was a little surprised, but I guess this is how we do it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Next item on is the city manager's report. Mr. Phelps?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, I have two items here, and this is kind of a follow along. So first of all, our Glendale communications team just won another National Savvy Award. And so this award was given for the unique way in which we promoted the Rolling Stones record-setting concert at State Farm Stadium. And with the support of the city council, the city symbolically renamed 95th Avenue off of Maryland to Satisfaction Way. And Mayor Wires, if you recall, proclaimed the concert day of Tuesday, May 7th as Ruby Tuesday. Legendary Stones frontman Mick Jagger personally thanked the city on stage during the concert, and the band posted numerous photos on their social media websites showing the signs of Satisfaction Way that we installed for the concert. And that went out to more than 25 million people that are kind of hit their channel, and so they're, as you know, one of the world's largest and considered to be the greatest rock and roll band, and so we had all kinds of their fans that were seen on the concert day taking selfies underneath the sign of Satisfaction Way. In selecting the Glendale team, the National Association 3CMA, their judges made these following comments. And it said, "You rode the wave of a mega rock band and used minimal resources to their fullest. What creative ideas. Surely this brought tremendous pride to the city and your department. Congratulations." And so I've got the award here, Mayor, and so I'll pass that down so each of you can see that. This is obviously the council award as much as it is staff. Following up on the theme of awards, at the League of Arizona Cities and Towns annual conference a few weeks ago, the league president recognized two of our Glendale council members with Distinguished Service Awards. And the awards are given to council members that serve a minimum of 8 years. They give them in 4-year increments. And so I now have plaques that I want to present both to Councilmember Vice Mayor Ian Hugh for 16 years of service, and Councilmember Joyce Clark for her 24 years of service. And congratulations to both of you. Finally, And before I hand out the two plaques that I have for you, just also want to recognize that Mayor Wires was voted in unanimously by all 91 cities as the treasurer of the league, and this is an officer position for the league executive committee and puts him in line to eventually serve as vice president, then president of the Arizona League of Cities. But I'll present the two plaques to you at this time.
Perfect. Why don't you guys go up there? Well, yeah. Oh, or not. The comment city manager made as he was giving them out was Joyce's is larger than Ian's because she had more years in. So.
And that concludes the awards presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey.
No report today, thank you.
Okay, council item special interest. We take this opportunity to give each council member an opportunity to indicate topics they'd like to have discussed by this council in a future workshop. Mr. Baldonegro, have you any?
No, sir.
Councilmember Clark?
Not at this time, Mayor.
Mr. Melner, are you still on the phone?
Nothing today.
He's here.
Oh, you're not, you're here, okay. Councilmember Tomachoff?
Nothing today, Mayor.
Councilmember Turner?
Not today, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay, and I have nothing. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So move.
Can I get a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Here you guys have it. Do you have it? Council meeting is recessed.